I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you are gripping a secret with both hands.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean, I don't mean a fun, fleeting piece of gossip. I want you to imagine holding on to a truth so profound and holding it so tightly that the sheer gravitational pressure of keeping it hidden actually begins to warp the atmosphere around you.
That's exactly it. It warps everything.
Right. You're doing it to survive. You might even convince yourself you are doing it to protect the people around you. But the quiet, invisible shockwaves of your silence are slowly, inevitably tearing your world apart.
Yeah.
Welcome back to another deep dive. We are incredibly thrilled to have you, the learner, with us today because the source material sitting on the table in front of us takes that exact psychological premise and executes it with just devastating precision.
It really is a remarkable piece of cinematic literature. It captures the visceral claustrophobia of living a double life better than almost anything I have read in recent years.
Seriously. So, the piece we are examining today is an incredibly nuanced screenplay titled The Dovecote. It was written by Ben Sparna and Andras Marc-Soleil. On a surface level, you could classify this as a coming-of-age story.
You could.
But throwing that label on this script feels a bit like calling a hurricane a weather event.
Yeah, that completely misses the magnitude of what's happening here.
Exactly. The narrative anchors around a 14-year-old boy named Máté Kovács. Máté is grappling with his emerging sexuality, he is buckling under the crushing, unspoken expectations of his family, and his meticulously controlled universe is being entirely upended by a boy in his year named David.
I think we need to establish right away why this script demands our attention. We have all seen the traditional coming-out narrative before, and they are important, but they often follow a predictable emotional trajectory. The Dovecote operates on a completely different frequency.
Yeah, it really does.
This isn't just a story about a boy realizing he likes other boys. It is a rigorous, almost clinical examination of the architecture of a lie. The writers show us the blueprint of deception, how a lie is constructed, how it requires constant, exhausting maintenance, and the catastrophic structural failure that occurs when that lie finally collapses under its own weight.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore the incredibly heavy, tangible price of hiding who we fundamentally are. We are going to examine the collateral damage that our secrets inflict on the people who inadvertently become our shields.
Collateral damage is the perfect phrase for it.
And, of course, we are going to dissect the script's central, profound metaphor, the Dovecote itself. Because by the time we reach the final scene, you are going to understand exactly why safety and freedom are frequently opposing forces. So to truly grasp the weight of Máté's secret, we can't just look at Máté. We have to examine the specific ecosystem where that secret was cultivated. We need to walk into the pressure cooker of normal. Can you set the scene for us? How do the writers establish this suffocating environment before anyone even really says a word?
They do it through an immediate immersion into performative domesticity. The opening scene takes place in the Kovács family kitchen on a bright, sunny weekday morning. If you mute the dialogue, it looks like a commercial for the perfect Eastern European middle-class family.
Total perfection.
Right. You have Eva, the mother, orchestrating breakfast at the stove. You have Gábor, the father, scrolling through the news on his phone. And then Bence, Máté's 10-year-old little brother, careens into the room, totally absorbed in a mobile game. But the writers inject tension into this idyllic visual immediately.
Yeah.
Well, Bence is vibrating with childhood excitement because he just beat a difficult level in his game. He expects shared enthusiasm. Instead, Gábor doesn't even lift his eyes from his screen. He just drops a single word. He says, Bence. And a beat later, he issues a command, straight up. He is ordering a 10-year-old to correct his posture at the family breakfast table.
And Bence actually pushes back.
Yeah.
He asks the logical question any kid would ask, why do I have to set up perfectly straight in my own kitchen if I have to do it all day at school? And Gábor's response is just chilling in its casual authority. He says, because you're a human at home too.
Yes.
It's such a heavy-loaded statement. It equates physical compliance with basic humanity.
That brief exchange functions as the psychological blueprint for the entire Kovács household. We should be very clear here. The script does not frame Gábor as a cartoon villain or an overtly abusive tyrant. He represents a very specific, recognizable archetype.
The exhausted provider.
Exactly. He is a man who expends all his energy out in the world providing for his family, and when he crosses the threshold of his home, he demands an absolute cessation of conflict. He wants zero drama. He requires total order. By equating a slouched back with a lack of humanity, He establishes an environment where normalcy is the ultimate virtue.
Right. Any deviation from his rigid definition of order isn't just a quirk. It is a disruption that must be immediately disciplined out of existence.
Precisely. Which brings us to Eva, the mother.
She isn't opposing the physical discipline, but she is enforcing a different kind of suffocating order, isn't she?
She absolutely is. She is deeply, actively invested in the illusion of the picture-perfect family. She manages the morning routine with this breathless, forced cheerfulness. She announces to the kitchen, today everyone goes to school, everyone eats, and everyone sits straight.
She packages the father's authoritarianism into a little domestic joke.
Yes, but the subtext is roaring. The expectation is set in stone. This is a house where you do not make a fuss. You do not bring your messy, complicated feelings to the breakfast table. You fit into your designated slot.
I view Eva's role as the emotional sealant in this pressure cooker. If Gábor builds the walls of expectation, Eva seals the cracks so nothing uncomfortable can leak out.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it. Now let's look at how Máté, our protagonist, enters this deeply constrained space. When Máté walks into the kitchen, his t-shirt is entirely inside out. Bence, with the unfiltered observation of a 10-year-old, points it out instantly.
Right.
Máté doesn't laugh it off or admit he got dressed in the dark. He claims he meant to do it. He claims it's a deliberate choice.
Which is such a masterful piece of visual screenwriting. His literal clothes are inverted, completely inside out, perfectly mirroring his internal emotional state. Everything inside of him is upside down, reversed, entirely at odds with the world around him. But he cannot admit a moment of absent-mindedness. He has to project total control, even over a wardrobe malfunction.
The refusal to admit a simple mistake reveals the depth of his anxiety. Máté cannot afford to be perceived as out of control because in the ecosystem of this family, Máté is not permitted to be a messy teenager. He has adopted the role of the second adult.
The second adult.
Yes, and the emotional labor he performs is staggering. Let's look at the moment right after the parents leave for work. The performative tension breaks, and Ben's completely deflates. The 10-year-old confesses that his morning is actually ruined because he was kicked out of an online gaming group called the Vortex Squad for being too slow.
Such a classic kid crisis.
It is, but Máté's reaction is incredibly telling. He doesn't tease his brother. He doesn't dismiss it as a stupid video game. He offers Bence a piece of profound, hard-won wisdom. He tells him that getting kicked off a team doesn't mean you are flawed. It means they lack the capacity to understand what you are capable of.
And Bence is immediately suspicious of this philosophical answer. He looks at his older brother and asks, have you ever been kicked out of something? And Máté delivers this line that just breaks your heart. He says, not exactly, but there were times I wasn't even let in.
It's a staggering moment of vulnerability.
It really is. Máté is verbalizing his core trauma. He feels fundamentally locked out of the normal world that his parents expect him to inhabit. He knows he doesn't have the key to that door. But instead of wallowing in that isolation, he weaponizes his pain to create a shield for his brother.
Weaponizing the pain is an excellent way to frame it. Máté has constructed what we might call a comprehensive shield of brotherhood. He views it as his ultimate duty to insulate Bence from the rejections of the world.
Yeah.
We see this externalized later that very same day. They are in the chaotic environment of the school hallway, and an older boy begins bullying Bence. Máté doesn't hesitate. He doesn't calculate the risk. He throws himself physically between his brother and the bully, absorbing the aggression, completely sacrificing his own safety to maintain Bence's.
Which naturally lands Máté sitting across from the school principal. And the dialogue in the principal's office acts as a dark mirror to the morning kitchen scene. The principal gives Máté this standard administrative lecture, telling him, there is always time to speak up. You don't have to use your fists.
Right.
But we, the learner and the audience, know the tragic irony of that statement. Máté genuinely believes he does not have the luxury of speaking up. When you appoint yourself the protector of the family's fragile peace, you act in silence. You intercept the threat before it hits the radar of the adults, because the adults, his father, his mother, the principal, are fundamentally blind to the reality of his daily existence.
Let's linger on the psychological toll of this parentification. Parentification occurs when a child is forced to take on the emotional or practical responsibilities of an adult. Máté is carrying the burden of his brother's physical safety. He is carrying the burden of his father's demand for a frictionless household. He's carrying the burden of his mother's delusion of domestic perfection.
It's too much for a 14-year-old.
Way too much. When your entire identity is built around managing the emotional regulation of everyone else in your orbit, the internal weight of your own concealed identity becomes exponentially heavier. There is simply no available bandwidth for him to process his own emerging sexuality.
This overwhelming complexity in Máté is brilliantly contrasted by Bence's worldview. Bence is 10, and his understanding of the universe is wonderfully transactional. The writers introduce this concept of the chocolate economy.
A chocolate economy.
Yes, chocolate is Bence's universal currency. It is his legal tender for bets, for favors, for emotional labor. When they race to the school gates and Bence wins, he doesn't gloat. He demands his chocolate payout. When Máté defends him from the bully, Bence automatically assumes that Máté will expect a chocolate reimbursement for his services.
It serves as a vital narrative counterweight. The chocolate economy represents the stark simplicity of childhood. It operates on clear, explicit rules. Action A results in reward B. This childlike transactional system cuts directly through the dense, anxious subtext of Máté's life.
That's true.
At one point, Bence explicitly asks his brother, "What do you get for having someone watch over you all day?" And without waiting for an answer, the 10-year-old states, "A lot of chocolate." He assumes the world is fair. He assumes protection is rewarded.
I love that you bring that up because Bence hasn't developed the capacity for subtext yet. He doesn't realize that Máté's protection of him is driven by a desperate need to control at least one small corner of his chaotic life. Bence just thinks, hey, you help me, here's a Snickers bar.
Exactly.
It grounds this heavy, dramatic narrative in a very real, very authentic sibling dynamic. But that pure, uncomplicated childhood logic is on a collision course with the incredibly complex reality Máté is trying to suppress. And that collision begins with the introduction of David, shifting our focus to the physical weight of a secret.
David operates as the catalyst for the entire collapse. The screenplay introduces him not through a grand, sweeping romantic montage, but through a moment of intense psychological friction. David is a boy in his year, and the inciting incident of their relationship is utterly mundane, which is what makes it so powerful.
Right, it happens at school.
David happens to witness Máté defending Bence in that school hallway. Later, in a quiet moment, David approaches Máté and offers a simple, genuine compliment. He says, "Not everyone would do that."
Most teenagers would be thrilled to be recognized as brave or noble by a peer. But Máté doesn't preen. He doesn't even say thank you. His reaction is sheer unadulterated panic. He dismisses David instantly, tells him to go to class, and practically runs in the opposite direction. It begs the question for the learner. Why does a moment of gentle praise trigger a full-blown fight-or-flight response?
Máté panics because David has committed the ultimate transgression in a closeted person's world. He paid attention, David saw him. Máté has constructed a life entirely predicated on invisibility. He's the quiet kid, the good son, the protective brother. He blends into the background so nobody looks too closely.
I see.
If David is observant enough to register Máté's fierce, unspoken devotion to his brother, Máté's immediate terror is what else is David going to see? If the perimeter has been breached by observation, the secret is no longer safe.
And this internal panic manifests as external violence. The script escalates this beautifully. Later in the timeline, the two boys are in a combined physical education class. David, completely unaware of the minefield he is walking on, tries to extend an olive branch. He invites Máté to play basketball.
Right.
They're shooting hoops, the tension seems to be lowering, and David playfully points out that Máté keeps throwing nervous glances across the gym at a girl named Anna. It's standard teenage teasing. But for Máté, it is a catastrophic threat. His defenses slam down like a steel vault.
It's visceral.
When David tries to approach him in the locker room area a few minutes later to diffuse the awkwardness, Máté is so defensively coiled that he literally shoves David. This escalates instantly into a physical altercation, a desperate scuffle that the PE teacher has to physically break up.
Societal programming dictates that for young men, physical aggression is a far more acceptable public display than emotional vulnerability. Máté chooses violence because he is terrified of the alternative, but he isn't fighting David, he is fighting the mirror David holds up.
That's a great point.
We get the explicit confirmation of this psychology much later when they are hiding on the rusted fire escape behind the school. The adrenaline has faded, and Máté offers a confession that is devastating in its self-awareness. He tells David, "I attacked you because I know you want to help, and I was afraid that if I let you, then I'd lose you."
Let's really pause and examine that line. I was afraid that if I let you, I'd lose you. It is the ultimate paradox of self-sabotage. He deliberately pushes away the singular thing he yearns for because accepting that connection means dismantling his entire survival apparatus.
Exactly.
If he allows David into his emotional interior, He officially steps outside the boundaries of his father's normal world. He is preemptively destroying the relationship because he believes his own identity is fundamentally incompatible with being loved, and he would rather endure the pain of isolation now than the agony of a broken heart later.
It is a profoundly tragic emotional calculus for a 14-year-old to perform. But the writers don't just leave this struggle in the realm of dialogue. They ingeniously translate this emotional burden into tangible physical objects. They materialize the secret.
Oh, the T-shirt.
Yes. Let's look at the aftermath of that gym class fight. Máté is alone in the locker room. The school bullies, capitalizing on his vulnerable moment, have stolen and hidden his regular clothes. Máté is left standing alone, humiliated, shivering in his sweat-soaked gym shirt, and then David appears.
David doesn't offer a dramatic speech or suffocating pity, does he?
No, he quietly opens his gym bag, pulls out his own spare, clean, black T-shirt, and hands it to Máté.
That black T-shirt is doing so much heavy lifting narratively. Máté pulls it over his head, and the script notes that it is slightly too big for him. It physically engulfs him, much like his burgeoning, unmanageable feelings for David are engulfing his mind, but the real tension comes from the logistics of the item.
Because he has to take it home.
Exactly. Máté has to wear this physical manifestation of his secret back to his house. He has to smuggle a piece of David across the heavily guarded borders of the Kovacs household. And who is the border guard who catches him? It's Bence.
Right.
Bence stops him right in the school atrium, examines the black shirt, and states plainly, "This isn't yours." And then Bence leans in, sniffs the fabric, and says, "You smell completely different than at home. This isn't our detergent."
The invocation of scent there is a master stroke of screenwriting. Olfactory memory is the most primal, deeply rooted sensory experience we have. By introducing a foreign scent, the writers are signaling a permanent contamination of the sterile Kovacs ecosystem.
It's an invasion.
Yes, Bence instantly recognizes an olfactory dissonance. An alien element has breached the hull. The black T-shirt transforms from a piece of clothing into a physical anchor of David's presence in Máté's life. Máté can't explain it away. He's literally wearing the undeniable evidence of his hidden life across his chest.
And because Máté is absolutely forbidden from verbalizing the reality of that shirt, the immense pressure of the secret has to vent itself through alternative channels. We see Máté's coping mechanisms emerge. He's an artist, but he doesn't draw serene landscapes or comic book heroes. He processes his suffocating anxiety through aggressive, chaotic sketches. Bence catches him hunched over a notebook, carving these dense, furious, tangled knots of pencil lead into the paper. And Bence, with that piercing childhood intuition, doesn't tell him it's ugly. He tells his brother, "Draw the feeling, the truth." Even the 10-year-old senses the massive unspoken trauma sitting in the room with him.
This internal pressure culminates in a phenomenally tense interaction with his art teacher, Judith Nagy. The classroom assignment is agonizingly mundane. Draw a traditional still life, a vase, and an apple. It is an exercise in observing and replicating the expected, normal world.
But Máté doesn't do that.
No, when Judith circulates the room and pauses at Máté's desk, she doesn't see a vase. Máté has drawn a dark, oppressive, aggressively shaded tunnel. And deep in the vanishing point of that tunnel, there are two blurred, indistinct figures standing incredibly close together, hiding in the shadows.
His subconscious is practically screaming on the page. He is assigned to draw fruit, and instead, he drafts a literal visual representation of a closet. The architecture of his trauma is right there in charcoal.
Precisely. And Judith Nagy represents the ideal educator in this moment. She doesn't reprimand him for failing the assignment. She recognizes the cry for help. She leans down to his level and observes, it looks like these figures are running away from something, or hiding.
She is offering him the key to his own cage.
She provides a safe, judgment-free opening for him to speak. But Máté's survival instincts override his need for rescue. He immediately throws his arm over the sketchbook, physically blocking her view, and abruptly claims, everything is fine.
That interaction is excruciating to read, because you are watching an adult do everything right. She sees his pain, she extends the lifeline, and he refuses to grab it. It perfectly illustrates the terrifying reality of deeply closeted individuals. External observation of their pain is utterly useless if the internal terror is too great.
Yes.
An adult cannot crowbar the door of the closet open from the hallway. The person inside has to summon the impossible courage to turn the handle themselves. And Máté is nowhere near ready to touch that handle. In fact, his terror is so acute that he begins actively recruiting other people to barricade the door from the outside.
Which brings us to a deeply painful segment of the story.
Here's where it gets really interesting and ethically devastating. We have to discuss Anna and the collateral damage of hiding.
The narrative zooms out here. The writers shift the focus from the internal erosion of Máté's psyche to the external destruction his survival tactics cause. Because a secret possessing this much gravitational pull cannot exist in a vacuum. It requires constant energy to sustain, and inevitably that energy is harvested from the trust and affection of innocent bystanders.
Let's introduce Anna. Anna's a 15-year-old girl in their class, and she is brilliant, observant, and genuinely kind. She harbors a massive, obvious crush on Máté. But she isn't portrayed as a superficial high school stereotype. She truly sees Máté. She notices the heavy lifting he does for his brother. She is the one who coins the term the second adult to describe him.
Right.
She is constantly orbiting his mood swings, asking if he's all right, desperately trying to construct a safe harbor for him.
And Máté is acutely aware of her affection. More importantly, the adults in his life are aware of it. The script heavily implies that pairing off with Anna is the designated, normal trajectory Máté is expected to follow. If he dates the nice, smart girl, he fulfills his father's demand for order and his mother's desire for the perfect family picture. The societal pressure to utilize Anna as an alibi is immense.
Which catapults us into the scene in the park. Máté is walking home, flanked by Bence and Anna. Anna's doing all the emotional labor, trying to engage him, asking about his drawings, even offering to mediate between him and David because she misinterprets their tension as pure hatred. Máté's completely shut down.
Completely closed off.
He offers a flimsy excuse about needing to rush home to supervise Bence's homework. Anna finally hits her limit. She looks visibly crushed by the constant rejection. She turns her back to walk away, and in that precise moment, driven not by affection, but by a sudden suffocating wave of panic about his own abnormalities, Máté grabs her arm, spins her around, and kisses her.
It is a profoundly desperate maneuver. The stage directions are explicit. This is not a moment of passion. It is a tactical deployment of intimacy. Máté is searching for empirical proof of his own normalcy. He is gambling that if he forces himself to execute the mechanics of a heterosexual teenage romance, a spark might miraculously ignite, saving him from the terrifying reality of his attraction to David.
It's all a performance.
He is performing this kiss for an audience of 3 Bents, who is standing right there, society at large, and most tragically, himself.
And the performance fails catastrophically on an internal level. When he breaks the kiss, the script makes it clear he feels absolutely nothing but a hollow, ringing emptiness. But Anna's universe has just lit up. She is glowing. She genuinely believes her patience has been rewarded, and she has finally dismantled his emotional walls.
It's heartbreaking to watch.
And right here, the screenwriters deploy a startling, audacious cinematic technique. The ambient noise of the park fades out. Time seems to dilate. Máté turns his head away from Anna, looks directly into the lens of the camera, and breaks a fourth wall.
Breaking the fourth wall in a grounded, dramatic piece of realism is an enormous structural risk. It can shatter the suspension of disbelief. But here, it is the only viable choice. Why? Because Máté is experiencing absolute, total isolation. He has weaponized his relationship with Anna, he is alienated from David, and he cannot speak to his family.
He has no one.
He has literally no one in the physical world he can confess to. Therefore, the writers force the audience to become his reluctant confidants. He stares at us and admits, I really tried, but somehow I can't return it. I'm just lying to her. He makes us complicit in the knowledge that his pursuit of normalcy is actively suffocating him.
But the true tragedy of the human condition is that acknowledging a toxic coping mechanism doesn't magically stop you from using it. The very next afternoon, Máté slips back into his hidden reality. He meets David on that rusted, forgotten fire escape behind the school gym. The juxtaposition between this scene and the park scene is breathtaking.
Oh, completely different tones.
In the park, everything was public, forced, and rigid. On the fire escape, Máté is slouched, his head resting heavily on David's shoulder. They aren't engaged in deep philosophical debate. They're huddling over a glowing phone screen, laughing hysterically at a video of a cat doing a backflip.
It's so mundane.
It is so remarkably mundane. It is the relaxed, beautifully ordinary teenage experience that Máté has been entirely denied. And in that bubble of safety, Máté leans up and gives David a quick, entirely authentic, tender kiss.
The contrast is the point. The kiss with Anna was a loud, public broadcast of a lie. The kiss with David is a quiet, hidden whisper of the truth. But truth, much like a gas, expands to fill the space it's given. It rarely stays contained.
And the containment breaches instantly. The camera angle shifts, looking down through the grated metal of the stairs. Anna is standing on the landing above them. She had silently opened the stairwell door looking for Máté. She is looking down.
The tension here is unbearable.
She sees the comfortable weight of Máté's head on David's shoulder. She sees the kiss. She witnesses the soft, genuine smile that Máté has never, not once, offered to her. And she doesn't scream. She just silently lets the heavy metal door close and backs away into the shadows, utterly demolished.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this sequence articulates the core moral argument of the screenplay. The trauma of the closet is radioactive. It poisons everything in its proximity. The narrative brilliance here is that it refuses to let Máté off the hook. We, as the audience, intimately understand his terror. We empathize deeply with his panic, but empathy does not erase consequence.
No, it doesn't.
Máté's desperate flailing for self-preservation has turned a fiercely loyal girl into collateral damage. Anna's devastation isn't simply the sting of unrequited teenage love. It is a profound, violating betrayal. She realizes in that stairwell that she was never a partner. She was a prop. She was utilized as a human shield in a war she didn't even know was being fought.
It is a gutting realization. You want to reach through the screen and hug Máté, but you also want to scream at him for what he just did to Anna. The lie is now out in the wild. Anna possesses the truth. But before the external fallout from Anna can detonate, the internal pressure within the Kovacs family home finally reaches critical mass. We are moving into Section 4, the climax, the bedroom, and the shattered silence of the dropped canteen.
The writers have been meticulously tightening the screws scene by scene, and now they engineer a scenario where architectural containment completely fails. Máté has kept his family, his authentic self, and his performative self in entirely separate silos. Now, those silos collide.
And the collision is initiated, ironically, by an act of maternal love. Remember the black t-shirt?
Ava definitely noticed it.
Well, she did. And because she operates on the surface level of domestic image, she is thrilled. She sees her brooding, isolated son finally connecting with a peer. So during the spring break holiday, Eva essentially mandates that Máté invite David over to the house for cake.
She has absolutely zero comprehension of the radioactive dynamic she's inviting into her dining room.
None at all. She just thinks, oh, what a lovely boy. He gave my son a shirt. They must be best pals.
For Máté, this is a nightmare made flesh. Engaging with David in the liminal space of a school stairwell is manageable. It exists outside the established order. But having David sit at the Kovacs family dining table, consuming Eva's baked goods, breathing the air of Gábor's dominion, it is a catastrophic violation of the firewall Máté has built to survive. The threat of David inadvertently revealing the truth simply by existing in that space is paralyzing.
The atmosphere at that dining table is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Eva is in full hostess mode, cheerfully interrogating David about his grades and his family. Benz is blissfully ignorant, shoveling cake into his mouth, and Máté is sitting there, practically vibrating with suppressed terror.
He can't handle it.
He physically cannot endure the cognitive dissonance of his two worlds overlapping. In a sudden, jerky movement, he pushes his chair back, mutters an incoherent excuse about having to organize his room, and literally flees up the stairs, leaving his mother staring at his empty chair in total bewilderment.
And this is where David's character shines. A less mature character would feel insulted by the abandonment. But David possesses an emotional intelligence that far exceeds his years. He politely excuses himself from Eva's interrogation and follows Máté's path up the stairs. He steps into Máté's bedroom and firmly closes the door.
Closing the door is key.
The closing of that door is vital. He is symbolically shutting out the oppressive demands of the normal household below. He looks at Máté, who is pacing like a trapped animal, and simply says, sometimes a person just needs a little air. He validates the panic without demanding an explanation.
David moves to sit down next to Máté on the edge of the bed. But the screenwriters construct a brilliant physical set piece right here. Positioned precariously on a shelf directly above the bed is a massive, teetering tower of old plastic DVD cases. As David's weight hits the mattress, the bed frame shifts. The shelf violently shakes, and that entire unstable tower of plastic begins to cascade down toward them.
Just a great visual metaphor.
David's reflexes take over. He lunges, grabs Máté by the shoulders, and aggressively pulls him off the mattress, hauling them both down to the floor to avoid the falling debris. They hit the rug hard as dozens of DVD cases clatter and bounce all around them.
Let's analyze the spatial metaphor here. The writers are using the physical environment to tell the emotional story. That teetering, fragile, vertical tower of DVDs is the exact physical manifestation of the precarious tower of lies Máté has spent years building. It is unstable, it is artificial, and it is doomed to fall.
Doomed to fall.
When it finally collapses, David pulls Máté down from the elevated, exposed position on the bed to the grounded, horizontal reality of the floor. It forces them into a space of absolute, unavoidable vulnerability.
The cinematic framing of this moment is intense. They're tangled together on the rug, chests heaving from the adrenaline of the fall, their faces suspended mere inches apart. The shock of the physical impact seems to temporarily short-circuit Máté's anxiety. The relentless noise of his internal panic goes quiet. And in that suspended, breathless silence on the floor, surrounded by the plastic wreckage of his room, Máté finally exhales the truth.
What does he say?
He whispers, "I think I'm in love with you," and the kiss. It isn't rushed. It isn't a panicked performance. It is the profound release of a valve that has been holding back years of pressure. It is a moment of pure, earned beauty. But then the universe intervenes.
Clang. The sound design interrupts the romance. It is the sound of reality crashing through the floorboards.
Exactly. The camera instantly cuts from the boys on the rug to the bedroom doorway. The door wasn't fully latched. Bence is standing in the threshold. He had wandered upstairs, clutching his heavy metal water canteen. He saw the crack in the door, peered inside, and witnessed his older brother, his protector, his hero, locked in a romantic embrace with David.
Oh, Bence.
In the sheer paralyzing shock of the visual, Bence's small hands lose their grip. The heavy metal canteen plummets and strikes the hardwood floor with a sharp, violent clang that echoes like a gunshot through the house.
Máté's physical reaction to that sound is instant, visceral terror. The blood drains from his face. He scrambles backward, his entire body screaming flight. He looks at his 10-year-old brother and practically begs, "Please, you can't tell anyone." Máté is projecting his own internalized homophobia and his father's rigidity onto the child. He fully expects Bence's face to contort in disgust. He expects the authoritarian worldview of Gábor Kovács to emerge from the mouth of a fourth grader.
But the brilliance of the script is that Bence is not his father. Bence is 10. He operates on that pure, untainted chocolate economy logic. He stands there, looking at the boys, processing the data points, the foreign black t-shirt, the tension at the dinner table, the kiss on the floor. The gears turn in his head, and he bypasses every adult prejudice in existence. He simply looks at Máté and asks, "Is David your Anna?"
Is David your Anna? I could spend an hour just unpacking the philosophical weight of that single line of dialogue. Bence takes one of the most complex, heavily stigmatized, politically charged issues in adult society and effortlessly distills it into an undeniable, universal human truth. Love is love.
That's so pure.
The child's brain lacks the vocabulary for bigotry. He simply takes the only romantic dynamic he understands, a boy harboring feelings for a girl, and maps it directly onto the reality presenting itself in front of him. It is an extraordinary moment of cognitive empathy.
I am continually in awe of how the writers crafted that interaction. Bence doesn't judge. He simply assimilates the new information. He solemnly promises to keep the secret locked away. And true to his transactional nature, he demands only one concession for his silence, that they ensure a large slice of Eva's cake is reserved for him. It is this soaring, beautiful moment of unconditional brotherhood. Máté spent the entire first act physically throwing himself in front of bullies to protect Bence's body, and now Bence is standing in a doorway, effortlessly protecting Máté's soul.
But we have to acknowledge that the relief Bence provides is merely a localized tourniquet. It doesn't stop the broader hemorrhaging. Bence's silence is secured, but the structural integrity of Máté's double life is fundamentally compromised. Anna already possesses the truth. The walls are closing in rapidly. Máté cannot sustain the psychic toll of navigating these competing realities for much longer. He is being driven inevitably toward a complete psychological break, which brings us to the thematic core of the entire narrative, the metaphor of the dovecote.
The Dovecote. This structure has been lingering in the background of the cinematography since the very first act. It's an old, weathered, wooden pigeon house situated in the overgrown corner of the Kovács garden. Máté and Bence were lazily trying to nail some loose boards back onto it earlier in the story. Now we jump forward slightly in the timeline.
Okay.
The disastrous fallout from Anna discovering the truth has begun to manifest, though Máté hasn't fully faced it yet. It's late at night. Máté has retreated to the dark garden. He is sitting on the cold grass, leaning his back against the wooden stilts of the dovecote. He is weeping. He is utterly crushed by the converging pressures of his parents, David, and the guilt over Anna. The darkness feels absolute. And then the back door creaks open and Grandma Ilona steps out into the night.
Grandma Ilona functions as the archetypal wise elder, but she isn't a magical problem solver. She doesn't know the specifics of the teenage drama. She doesn't know about the black t-shirt, or Anna's heartbreak, or David. but she possesses a deep, intuitive wisdom forged by a lifetime of observation. She steps into the garden, bringing him a steaming mug of tea. She doesn't demand a confession. She simply sits beside her trembling grandson, follows his gaze up to the empty, decaying dovecote, and begins to speak.
She tells him a story from the past. She speaks in this quiet, rhythmic cadence. She tells Máté that many decades ago, when his grandfather was a young man, he owned a magnificent snow-white pigeon. It was the prize of the garden. But the grandfather was consumed by anxiety. He was terrified that if he let the bird out, a hawk would dive from the clouds and tear it apart, or that the bird would simply fly away and never return.
Classic overprotection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, driven by a desperate, possessive need to protect the thing he loved, the grandfather closed the wooden door of the dovecote and locked it tight. He kept the pigeon absolutely safe from the dangers of the sky.
The allegory is beautifully constructed, but it's the moral conclusion Ilona draws that shatters Máté's worldview. She doesn't praise the grandfather's caution. She tells Máté that the pigeon remained physically beautiful, untouched by predators. But because it was denied the sky, its wings atrophied. It entirely forgot how to fly.
Wow.
By shielding it from the world, the grandfather fundamentally destroyed the essence of the bird. And then Ilona looks directly at her grandson, piercing right through his teenage defenses, and delivers the thesis of the film. Those who keep their doors closed might be safe, but they will never be truly free. And what's worst, they remain completely alone inside.
Safe, but never truly free. The delivery of that line is like a physical detonation in the quiet garden. You can watch the realization ripple across Máté's face. The story perfectly articulates his entire existence. In his desperate, exhausting campaign to keep himself safe, safe from his father's authoritarian judgment, safe from the casual cruelty of the school hallways, safe from the predatory hawks of society, he has willingly locked himself inside a lightless box.
And he's suffocating.
And the air in the box has run out. He is suffocating himself. He is violently pushing away David's love. He is mutilating Anna's trust. He has achieved a perfect, miserable safety. And he is entirely, profoundly alone.
The introduction of this specific narrative framework provides Máté with the vocabulary to understand his own suffering. It is the catalyst for the climax. The equation in his mind finally shifts. He realizes in that damp garden that the slow, agonizing death of living inside the cage has finally surpassed the terror of facing the hawks outside. His resolve to hide simply evaporates.
The transition from that realization to action is immediate. Máté leaves the tea on the grass. He stands up, walks out of the dark garden, pulls open the sliding glass door, and walks straight into the brightly lit living room. Gábor and Eva are sitting on the couch, peacefully scrolling through a phone together, laughing at a video. The domestic illusion is at its peak. Máté stands in the center of the rug, looks at his parents, and drops the bomb. He doesn't prevaricate. He says clearly and distinctly, "I don't like girls. I'm attracted to boys. And there's someone. David?"
What elevates this script is its commitment to messy realism. The writers refuse to provide a saccharine fairy tale reaction from the parents. Conversely, they avoid turning them into cartoonish bigots. The reaction is deeply human and intensely chaotic.
It's so grounded.
Right. Gábor's entire architectural understanding of his family is instantly demolished. He goes into a state of bewildered shock. His immediate reaction isn't to scream slurs, it's a panicked grasp at the future he had mapped out. He stammers, asking, "What will become of you? How are you going to live?" He views it as a catastrophic deviation from the safe path. Eva, on the other hand, is completely overwhelmed. She is whooping, struggling to process the destruction of her perfect family picture, but her core maternal instinct fiercely overrides the societal programming. She lunges off the couch, pulls Máté into a desperate, crushing embrace, and sobs into his shoulder, "You'll always be my son, whatever happens. Just please, don't lie to us anymore."
It is a phenomenal emotional release. Máté is trembling, but he's standing upright. The invisible anvil has been lifted off his chest. He retreats upstairs to his bedroom, collapses into his desk chair, and spins around. He is smiling, a wide, genuine, uncontrolled smile for the very first time in the entire story. He believes he has crossed the finish line. He survived the crucible. But the screenwriters are ruthless.
They are not going to let him enjoy the high.
Not all, because the narrative demands a reckoning. The truth about his internal identity is out, but the external wreckage caused by his lies is still smoldering.
Actions in the real world have compounding consequences. Coming out is often framed as the final victory in these narratives. The Dovecote argues that coming out is merely the prerequisite for the real work taking accountability for the damage inflicted while operating in the dark.
Precisely. And that accountability arrives like a freight train the very next morning. It's a Saturday. Máté is standing at the front gate of the garden, bathed in sunshine, eagerly waiting for David to walk up the street. He is ready to begin his authentic life. But the figure marching up the sidewalk isn't David. It is Anna. And she is practically radiating fury.
She wants answers.
She didn't come to offer congratulations or seek closure. She came to deliver a reckoning. She stands at the iron gate and unleashes on him. She tears into him for stringing her along, for exploiting her affection, and explicitly for the hollow performative kiss in the park. Her volume is completely unchecked. She is yelling so loud that the sound carries directly to the front porch, where Gábor is standing holding a cup of coffee.
This specific moment serves as a brilliant pivot for Gábor's character development. Gábor steps off the porch and approaches the gate. He has just heard a teenage girl explicitly detail how his son manipulated her, kissed her as a cover story, while secretly pursuing a boy. Gábor's face darkens with absolute fury, but the genius of the writing is in what Gábor focuses his rage upon. He does not yell about Máté's homosexuality. He attacks Máté's profound lack of integrity.
Yes, Gábor's dialogue here is blistering. He points a finger at Máté and roars, "You stood before us yesterday in the living room and swore you didn't want to lie anymore. So what couldn't you say just now? That you're messing around with girls to hide. That you're playing this whole entire thing, however, is convenient for you."
It's powerful.
Gábor is utterly repulsed that his son utilized another human being as a disposable shield. He strips Máté of his newfound pride, grounding him indefinitely on the spot, banishing him back into the house. In a matter of seconds, Máté's glorious triumph turns to bitter ash in his mouth. He realizes the cage isn't fully gone. He just changed the locks.
This sequence propels us directly into the final act, Section 6. We are moving from revelation into the difficult, unglamorous labor of reconciliation. Máté is banished to the isolation of his bedroom, leaving his father fuming alone at the front gate. And the timing of the universe is impeccable, because who comes casually strolling up the driveway at that exact moment? David. He is carrying a white cardboard pastry box, fulfilling the promise of cake he made to little Bence.
Talk about walking into a buzzsaw. David approaches the gate, entirely unaware of the nuclear explosion that just occurred. Gábor is practically vibrating with leftover rage. He turns his anger toward David, demanding to know what kind of mess they are dragging his son into, venting his disgust over Máté's manipulation of Anna. A typical teenager would flinch, get defensive, or simply run away.
But David remains grounded. His response demonstrates an astonishing capacity for grace. He doesn't attempt to excuse or justify Máté's behavior toward Anna. Instead, he looks this towering, furious patriarch directly in the eye and recontextualizes the crime. David says, calmly, Máté was very afraid. When a person is terrified of losing their family, they do stupid things, and they lie. Not because they're a bad person, sir, but because they're panicking.
The profound empathy in that statement is staggering. David doesn't meet the father's anger with defiance. He meets it with a psychological diagnosis. He forces Gábor to look past the ugliness of the lie and see the sheer paralyzing terror that necessitated it, and you can visibly see the fight drain out of Gábor.
The anger just diffuses.
The father recognizes the quiet maturity radiating from this boy. He realizes, perhaps with a pang of parental failure, that David understands the internal landscape of his son far better than he ever has. With a heavy sigh, Gábor unlatches the iron gate, steps aside, and tells David to go upstairs to Máté's room.
It is a monumental concession from a man who demands absolute order. But the conflict isn't fully resolved. The adults have stepped back, but the peer dynamic is still fractured. Unbeknownst to Gábor and David, Bence has been lurking near the open windows. He has processed the entire confrontation with Anna. And the 10-year-old decides that the adults are moving too slowly. He initiates what we could affectionately call the conspiracy of the kids.
Bence is the unsung hero of this entire narrative. Máté is grounded, confined to quarters, so he physically cannot seek out Anna to make amends. So Bence takes matters into his own hands. When Monday morning arrives, Bence intercepts Anna in the school courtyard before the bell rings. He looks up at her and delivers this fiercely loyal, incredibly blunt pitch. He tells her Máté is a complete idiot, but what he did wasn't fair, and he knows it. He uses his childhood earnestness to convince a heartbroken 15-year-old girl that she needs to confront his brother one last time.
And he successfully coordinates the ambush. He recruits David as well. The three of them form a unified front. They corner Máté in the narrow, crowded corridor by the school lockers. It is a literal firing squad of accountability. They form a semicircle around him, physically blocking his escape routes. They barrage him with demands. Anna tells him he can't treat people like disposable props. David tells him he has to stop running from reality. They push and push, demanding that Máté face the ugliness of his actions. And finally, the immense compounding trauma of the last few weeks shatters Máté's composure entirely. He snaps.
The auditory contrast here is brilliant. Remember the sharp, accidental clang of the canteen that terrified Máté earlier. Now Máté takes hold of the heavy metal door of his locker and violently slams it shut. Bang! It is a massive, aggressive, intentional sound that silences the entire hallway. He spins around, tears streaming down his face, and he finally unleashes his own reality onto them.
The emotional climax.
He screams, his voice cracking. Do you think this is all so damn easy? Do any of you have any idea what it feels like to wake up every morning and go to sleep every single night for weeks, completely terrified of who you are? I was afraid everyone would look at me and hate me. I was afraid my own parents would disown me and throw me out.
That visceral outburst is the emotional climax of the entire screenplay. Up until that explosive moment, Anna, Bence, and even David, to a degree, had been demanding moral accountability from a place of relative safety. They were asking him to behave rationally. When Máté finally verbalizes the sheer, unadulterated terror of his existence, the conspirators are struck silent. They are forced to recognize that they were demanding perfectly polite behavior from a boy who felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff fighting for his actual life.
It recontextualizes everything for them. The righteous anger in Anna's eyes instantly dissolves into a complex mixture of pity and guilt. Máté, completely exhausted by the outburst, grabs his backpack, shoulders past them, and bolts out the heavy double doors of the school building. The three of them don't hesitate. They run out after him. They find him a block away, slumped against a rough brick wall on a street corner, gasping for air, totally depleted. And this, right here against this brick wall, is where the authentic, lasting reconciliation occurs.
Right.
Máté doesn't offer excuses anymore. He looks Anna in the eye, and he delivers a raw, tearful apology. He confirms that he truly loved her as a best friend, but his terror over his feelings for David was so absolute that he selfishly clutched onto her as a lifeline to keep from drowning.
He finally achieves complete ownership. He owns his identity, and crucially, he owns the damage he caused while trying to hide it. And Anna, seeing the absolute sincerity of his remorse and understanding the context of his panic, chooses to forgive him. The slate is wiped clean through the difficult labor of honest communication.
It is such an earned, deeply moving moment. The tension evaporates. Bence, sensing the emotional heavy lifting is over, immediately demands that since Máté caused all this drama, Máté is financially obligated to buy them all pastries instead of going to first period. It beautifully cuts the tension. Which brings us, finally, to the closing sequence of the script. We jump forward in time about a week. The setting is back at the Kovacs' house, but it isn't the claustrophobic, aggressively normal kitchen from the opening scene. They are outside.
The lighting changes.
The spring sun is pouring down on the open terrace. The four kids, Máté, David, Anna, and Bence, are casually lounging around the patio table, drinking sodas bathed in light. The rigid, performative tension that defined Máté's early existence is entirely absent.
And into this perfectly relaxed atmosphere, Bence, wielding his signature lack of filter, drops a conversational grenade right onto the center of the table. He pauses his video game, looks directly at his older brother, and asks with complete sincerity, "So, Máté, which kiss was actually better? Anna's in the park or David's on the rug?"
I cannot emphasize enough how brilliant that line is. The sheer audacity of this 10-year-old. For a split second, the entire table freezes in shock. The trauma of the past is suddenly invoked. But then, Máté snorts. Anna covers her mouth. David chuckles. And the entire table erupts into massive, breathless, genuine laughter. It is the sound of absolute liberation. The dark, suffocating power of the secret has been entirely neutralized. It's been dragged out of the shadows, exposed to the sunlight, and transformed from a source of terror into a shared, slightly embarrassing piece of their collective history.
As they laugh, the camera execution provides the final narrative framing. The perspective slowly pulls backward, moving inside the house. We see Gábor and Eva standing quietly in the kitchen, observing the kids through the large glass window. The parents are no longer demanding order, they are simply witnessing the joy of their children. Gábor turns his head slightly toward Eva and references Grandma Ilona's story. He quietly notes that his father used to say, "If you finally gather the courage to open the door of the cage and let the pigeon fly freely, it always finds its way home."
It always finds its way home. Eva softly agrees, leaning against her husband. They watch their son, no longer a stranger in his own life, sitting openly under the sun, laughing endlessly with the boy he loves, his fiercely loyal best friend and his fiercely protective little brother. The pigeon has finally escaped the cage, and it is soaring.
It is an immensely satisfying structural resolution. The fragile vertical architecture of the lie, the hidden shirts, the dark stairwells, the fake kisses has been completely dismantled, and what has been constructed in its place is a wide horizontal architecture of truth. It was a messy, painful, destructive process to build it, but the foundation they are sitting on now is real, and it is solid.
So let's take a breath and reflect on the tremendous amount of ground we've covered today. We have journeyed from a suffocating, aggressively governed kitchen through the terrifying internal landscape of a closeted teenager, all the way to the messy, vibrant freedom of a sunlit terrace. We have analyzed how secrets, even those forged entirely out of a primal need for self-preservation, possess a literal physical weight. We witnessed that weight manifest in Máté's violent panic attacks, in his dark, frantic charcoal drawings, and in the devastating collateral damage he inflicted on the people who tried to love him. So, what does this all mean for you, the learner? Why does Máté's story matter? It serves as a profound reminder that protecting ourselves with deception almost inevitably wounds the exact people we're trying to keep safe. When we lock the heady wooden door of our own internal dovecote, we might temporarily avoid the gaze of the hawks. We might achieve a sterile, lonely safety. But we slowly suffocate the vitality right out of our own souls, and we leave the people who genuinely care about us standing outside a locked door in the dark, wondering what they did to deserve being shut out. Stepping into an authentic life is genuinely terrifying. It requires the systematic dismantling of the comfortable image that society expects you to project. But the only alternative is living and dying inside a cage of your own construction.
That is an excellent summation of the core themes. However, before we conclude, I want to present you with a slightly more provocative thought to carry with you. The screenplay concludes on a soaring, triumphant major chord. A beautiful, stable equilibrium has been achieved within the fortified walls of the Kovacs property and within Máté's immediate peer group. Gábor and Eva are actively working to understand their son. Anna has extended the grace of forgiveness. David is sitting openly by his side. Bence is still demanding chocolate. But if we return to Grandma Ilona's metaphor for just a moment, the wooden door of the Dovecote is indeed open. Máté is finally flying free. But we must remember that the sky outside that garden is still full of hawks. The school bullies who stole his clothes in the locker room have not experienced a magical revelation. The prejudices of the wider, less forgiving world are still waiting just beyond the fence. When Máté and David eventually finish their sodas, step off that sunlit terrace and walk out into the broader, uncontrolled reality of society, how will this hard-won authenticity survive? What happens when the world pushes back and demands that they return to the safety of the cage? It leaves us to deeply ponder the reality that authenticity is not a finish line you cross once. It requires ongoing, daily, exhausting courage to live freely in a world that so frequently prefers we remain hidden in the shadows.
What an incredibly vital point to end on. Authenticity as a daily, deliberate practice of courage, choosing the open sky over the cage every single day. We want to extend our deepest gratitude to you, the learner, for joining us on this exhaustive deep dive into the Dovecote. We hope this exploration provided you with as much to reflect upon as it did us. Until next time, keep exploring the narratives around you, keep questioning the structures you live within, and whatever you do, keep the door to your own Dovecote wide open.